Start. Okay, hello. Good morning. Just managed to start right on time today. So we're 1 minute past past. We'll give it another minute or so for some of the other colleagues to join us. And the nice thing is today we're starting another new topic. So back in November, we had the first four sessions were about new client hunting. And that was basically an introduction to legal business development. You know, what is all of this? What's it about? Why should you do it? Maybe how can you do it? Then in December, we had the second topic, which was sales writing. And in those 4 sessions, we looked at how to hopefully actually get a return on investment from our writing. Because to be honest, in my experience with almost all of the law firms around the world, I don't think they're doing it that effectively from a sales perspective. So we can do our newsletters and our articles and even our emails. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to work from a sales perspective, and usually they don't. So that was what we did in December. And now in January, a nice start to the new year, we're going to be looking at the topic of sales networking. So in today's session and the next 3 broadcasts, we're going to look at if you're a lawyer, or actually this would work for anybody, I think. It doesn't have to just be for legal services. If you are going to an exhibition, a conference, any kind of event, you know, how can you actually get some real return on investment in terms of something that leads to concrete work? And again, I don't want to sound kind of arrogant, but what I see is basically almost everybody is doing this wrong. So there is some kind of best approaches, some tips and tricks, which I've seen in the different countries. Some of the stuff that I've thought up myself based on going to many of these events on how we can do this from a little bit more pragmatic perspective to actually generate meetings and mandates and finally money from the events that we go to, or even indeed the events that we do ourselves. It is entirely possible. It's entirely possible to be in a major international law firm with a very good brand and a very good reputation, and not only to go to events, but even to hold events, not just webinars like we were doing very much during the pandemic, but actual business breakfasts. And at the end of the day, to see no return on investment coming from that at all. And again, that kind of excuse or justification to say it's good for our brand, it's good for our publicity, our image. Again, I'm not convinced. I usually think that your brand is fine. That sounds like just an excuse if we can't see any other tangible return on what we're doing. So again, let me hopefully, without technical issues, because I'm pretty good when it comes to Zoom. I'll try and share my screen, and then we'll be able to see the presentation for today. And again, guys, don't be shy. You can ask questions. 1 second. Okay. So you can ask questions at any time. Just put them into the chat function. So we have the first 30 minutes, which is going to be the lecture. You can ask questions during the lecture time. Now I'll see what you write. And you can ask questions in the last 30 minutes when we have the Q&A session. So hopefully you can see my screen. 1 second. So maybe if anyone could tell me in the chat function if you can see the slides. Chat. Okay, let's begin. So transitions, slideshow. Okay, from beginning. Okay. Just a second. New share. There we go. Share. All right. So hopefully you can see the screen now. Right. So we know what the early morning show is. We have this every Thursday morning, and today is lecture number 9. So we've done the first 4 on new client hunting and the second 4 on sales writing. And there are different ways that you can use the early morning show. The simplest way is to just allow lawyers to take this, to watch this, to see this. Okay, Miklos says chat isn't working. Okay, just try in the Q&A part if the chat doesn't work. All right. So, like always, we have 16 key ideas that we're going to look at in the session today. You can see these here. We're going to look at a couple of common mistakes which happen, which I call conversion zero, kind of speaks for itself, and then a meet and greet roadshow. We'll be looking at the different types of events that you could go to, what I would recommend, what I recommend to avoid, as well as the different levels of networking that you can actually be doing there. There's a few things that it would be a good idea for you to understand and even to prepare. The concept of the conversion ratio, which we've talked about before, is absolutely critical for sales networking. And it's a good idea to have a hit list and to do our preparation, including something called spectrum analysis. Even with the best preparation, however, we might find it necessary to be engaged in something which I call new client hunting or KDM hunting at the event. How we present ourselves is important, and even our perspective on how we think about the event and the people that are there. I have the nice concept number 10, 99% of people are nice. We need to present ourselves with confidence and to have a kind of basic awareness of body language, especially when approaching different groups, where we can look at, the feet, the posture, the eye contact, to have an awareness of this. It's going to be important not just to speak to as many different people as possible, but to be quite selective with whom we speak, to ideally go for the KDMs. And so this can help us to speak to the right people. We'll see how to get into groups. We'll take an approach. There are different approaches to getting into a new group. One approach is called the Comet approach, although there are a few others. And we'll see a mistake, which I call, well, it's actually 2 mistakes, the king and prince mistake, which leads us to the 10-minute rule, and then the idea of follow-up and how quickly you should do the follow-up. So in today's very first session about new client hunting, we're looking at what you do before a sales networking event, and then some of the basic stuff that you do in order to get into groups. I think it's fair to say that there are 2 really difficult points in sales networking. The first being to get into a group, and then the next to get out of a group. So leaving groups, that's something which we're going to look at next time. And we'll go into more depth in sessions 2, 3, and 4. I was just thinking, if you are one of the lawyers or partners who already studied sales networking with me, don't get bored and don't think, oh, I know this stuff, this is obvious. You can go into a lot more detail. So do feel free to ask questions, because there is a lot more information in each of these concepts and further down that we can look at. So if you think, I know that, you can dig deeper. So the first concept, and maybe it's obvious, but conversion zero. It is possible as a lawyer, as a partner, as a managing partner, even if you have 20 years of experience, it is possible to waste your time in business development, to do this without a return on investment. This applies not just for sales networking, this applies to anything that you do in business development. You can spend a lot of time, for example, writing an article, which nobody basically reads. If you check the click rate on articles published on your website, you might be disappointed. If you check the read rate of newsletters that you sign out, then you might also be disappointed. You can have conversion zero. Your activity leads to no individual conversations, what I call meetings, not in person, not via Teams, not by Zoom, and no mandates and no money. That's conversion zero. Same thing with sales networking. I've seen this actually happen. I was speaking to one Hungarian managing partner who, I think it was once or twice a year, was attending a specific event in Budapest. And this fellow had been doing it for a very long time, a number of years. And I asked him, what was the return on investment? How many meetings do you get out of this? How many mandates have you generated by going to these events? And he said, no, absolutely nothing yet, but I'm sure it will come. It takes time. You can be waiting a very long time. I think we saw in one of our previous sessions, the 1 month rule. And that means that anything that you do in business development, if you don't have some results within a month, you can basically forget it. It's unlikely to then happen later. So conversion zero is very often what I see when lawyers or partners go to different events. You can go to an event in San Francisco. You can spend a ton of money flying over to California. You can spend a ton of money going to some very prestigious event, paying the entry fee. You can speak to lots of people, but let's agree that if after a month when you come back, you haven't had any individual calls afterwards with key decision makers or leads, prospects that you had generated, then no mandates are going to be coming, and then I would call that conversion zero. So keep in mind, conversion zero is entirely possible. And the funny thing is, I think a lot of lawyers are doing exactly that. A lot of the lawyers are going to these awful, I call them awful, networking events, because it's just the thing to do. You know, you might go to some event by AmCham or the British Chamber of Commerce. I'm just using these examples. It doesn't mean I criticize those actual events. I think it depends on the country and the organization. And find that half of the audience is lawyers, and you can have a nice time and you can speak to people. You might hear some industry news, gossip, perhaps that's useful as well, and nothing actually comes from it, and probably nothing will. So be careful to avoid conversion zero. You have to drive towards getting meetings. The follow-up, what happens after the events, is very important. In the same way, in my book about L2L sales, law firm to law firm, you need to avoid a meet and greet roadshow. So this can happen at events. You meet people, you greet people, you send an email, nothing happens. You could even do a roadshow. You could go to, let's say you go to London, you meet 3 or 4 partners from good English law firms, you meet them, you greet them, you share some PowerPoint, nothing happens. It's wishful thinking. Meet and greet roadshow, this meet and greet meetings, not effective. You don't want to do that. You need to not simply drive towards getting the meetings, you need to have value propositions to offer. You need to do your preparation. You need to have concrete companies and entities that you can discuss and try and pitch towards. Now, in my experience, I think we've already talked about this before, but I'll repeat. You need to have some kind of segmentation in terms of your business development activities. Industry segmentation and industry events are usually better than practice segmentation. So, you know, it's probably a good idea for you to go to something like an automotive event and focus on auto sector, and then you'll be able to speak to automotive key decision makers, and hopefully there won't be too many other lawyers there. On the other hand, if you're going to some real estate law event full of real estate lawyers, that could be cool from an academic perspective. Maybe there'll be interesting legal topics to hear and discuss. I'm not sure there's going to lead to anything in terms of work, however. So consider very carefully that the work you do and what you offer and the events that you're going to. Just because it's traditional in your country that everyone is going to specific events doesn't mean that's the good thing to do. In fact, I think there are even different networking events, or like speed dating events. And I've seen this happen inside some very large international consulting companies. The idea is you're going to have 10 individual conversations during that event. Usually, I think that's absolutely ineffective. I don't think anything is going to come of it if you don't end up with some kind of individual 30-minute meetings afterwards, leading to some mandates. Again, I think there's a good chance that was a meet and greet. So be careful of events. You can pay a lot of money to go to an event which isn't going to generate anything for you. Now, when you get to an event, how you behave, and including the preparation that you've done, I think this shows different levels of networking. On the first level is basically absenteeism. There are lawyers who are not convinced they need to go to events. They don't want to go to events. For whatever reason, that's absenteeism. So nothing's going to happen. You don't find out what's happening on the market. You don't see current and next clients. You miss all the opportunities. The next level would be presenteeism. You're simply present at the event. You speak to your colleagues from your own law firm, and you don't speak to any new prospects. You've done no preparation. You haven't prepared at all. And so nothing much is going to happen afterwards. The next level, I would call this perhaps socializing. You don't realize that at the event, yes, it's very nice to make small talk. It's nice to speak to a few new people. You might have some nice conversations. You probably speak to people far too long. You might have a very nice time. That's socializing. It's better than just presenteeism, but still it's not going to lead to anything. The next level, I think, is where many partners are, which I call marketing networking. They have their business cards. They've done a bit of preparation. They meet different people. They might even do some follow-up. They send an email afterwards. They send over some generic PowerPoint presentation introducing their practice. They say something like, should you have any needs in our country, come back to us. We'll be glad to help. And again, usually nothing happens. So marketing networking, it's marketing. It's okay for your publicity, your exposure, your awareness, but it's probably not going to get you many or perhaps any sales. Sales networking, the topic which we're going to look at today, is where we understand our main metric is how many key decision makers do we speak to that event? Of these, how many do we manage to get individual 30-minute Teams meetings or face-to-face meetings after the event? That what happens after the event is much more important than what actually happens there. And then how many mandates come from it? And then we can measure the money. So again, we take the 4M approach. How many messages go out? How many meetings do we have? How many mandates come? And how much money do you get from it? So for example, if I was a managing partner sending a lawyer over to California, I would be very interested to know how many follow-up calls are actually coming from that event. And if the answer is 0, then I think you've probably just wasted your money in going and sending them to California. Now, worst case scenario, a lawyer isn't prepared for the event. They go to the event, and let's say they understand that most people are not going to be good potential clients for the legal services. So they're going to pay attention to the conversion ratio. They will say, okay, at this event, I'm going to make an effort to speak to 10 people. I understand that many of them might not need the services, so I've got to speak to quite a few people. It's not socializing, it's networking. We're there to get results. So you get 10 business cards. Of these 10 business cards, a very big mistake would be to follow up with all of them after the event, to email them a nice message and suggest our services. Most of those people will not need your services. Most of the people are not suitable for working with you. In fact, from these 10, maybe only 3 are worth follow-up. So within 24 to 48 hours of that event, you send them an AIDA email. We saw this in sales writing: awareness, interest, desire, action. You have a value proposition that you're suggesting to them in order to then get a face-to-face meeting, or at least a 30-minute Teams meeting. So you send off those 3 emails using the ideas we saw in sales writing. Of those 3, perhaps we get 2 meetings, and of those 2 meetings, we get 1 mandate, 1 client. That's your conversion ratio. Now, of course, conversion ratio applies not just to sales networking. We can apply it to all of our different business development activities. But I think it's quite important in sales networking, because let's imagine you go to the wrong event. You can get 10 business cards and 0 are suitable to follow up with. That means you went to the wrong event. On the other hand, you go to another event, you get 10 business cards, 3 of them look good. You send off your 3 messages, you get 0 meetings, 0 mandates. That means you're doing something wrong in terms of the value proposition that you're proposing, perhaps the level of the people that you're pitching to. So again, we can break down our activities chronologically with the conversion ratio and aim to optimize that with time. If you don't know what your conversion ratio is from an event, probably it's going to be conversion 0. So in order to avoid that scenario, you might want to have a hit list. If you're going to go to an event, could you get a list of attendees? If you can get a list of attendees, you can work out who are the interesting people on that list that you would like to speak with, rather than have 10 conversations which only lead to 3 emails. You could actually have 10 conversations with 10 key decision makers where you can really send out 10 follow-up emails. If you're paying for an event, you have the right to demand a list of attendees. Many of these events should share that with you anyway. Again, I'm very skeptical when you get this kind of speed dating at events where you can present yourself for 10 or 15 minutes to somebody. And my question would be, so what? You know, what happens? Meet and greet. You have a nice conversation. You speak to somebody, let's say, I don't know, from Brazil. They're from a reputable law firm in Brazil. That's wonderful. But when was the last time you actually ever needed outsourced legal advisory in Brazil? You know, guys, it's probably not going to happen. Most of these events are not effective. So make a hit list. In fact, you know, you should already have a hit list in your country. Let's imagine you're a banking and finance lawyer. You should have a hit list of the top banks and financial institutions in your country. You should see who are the CEOs, the CFOs, who would be the top 50 or 100 movers and shakers in that industry. And these are people that you want to connect with first on LinkedIn. You can do all of the social media marketing, social media sales. You can go to the events. These are the people that you're going to look out for, even without networking events. Most lawyers don't have hit lists. And of course, if you're going to a specific event, then to have a hit list, who would you like to see? Do a Google image search, see what they look like, connect with them before the event on LinkedIn. Introduce yourself. Don't be timid. Think, what can you offer? Yeah, what can you offer to them? This generic full-service law firm, one-stop shop for your legal needs, good reputation, plain vanilla isn't going to cut it. You can assume that good key decision makers at this event already have both an internal legal department and another law firm or law firms that you're working with. So you have to really think, what would be the product UVP, the solution that you can offer to them, or even solutions? What's going to get you through the door? Again, this comes down to preparation. It's okay if you don't do this, but if you don't do this, you're probably not going to get a meeting with them, and you might be ending up with a meet and greet. So make a hit list. You know, a lot of the preparation doesn't even have to be done by you. If you are already a senior lawyer or a partner, you might make your hit list. You have the 10 people that are in good positions that are going to be at that event. You can make a list of the 10 companies with the websites. You can delegate this to a paralegal or a junior assistant. You can ask them to do a thing called spectrum analysis. Now, spectrum analysis means that you get a one-page report about the company. And you delegate this to a very junior person. You can delegate this to an administrative person. And under spectrum analysis, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, we have the different colors. Each of these corresponds to a different criteria of that firm, 7 different questions, which we're going to ask the junior associate or the assistant to find about that company. So revenue is red. How much revenue is this company making? How big are they? You know, that will give us an idea of the kind of potential legal services we might be able to offer in our jurisdiction. Opportunities. We get the assistant or the junior legal person to look at their website, to look at the news, to look at their social media. What's actually happening recently? What are the opportunities? That comes to orange. That we can identify. This will make you look very good if you go to the event and you can drop into the conversation that you saw on their website, something that they're doing, or you read about, you know, some new hires on LinkedIn, that you see some different activities that company is doing. It shows that you're prepared. So we have the different, I mean, again, if we were doing a training on spectrum analysis, we could easily spend an hour just on this. So you can get a spectrum analysis done in half an hour for each of these targets and then have your intelligence in advance. You know, that's going to make you much more likely to get success in getting a follow-up meeting and mandates with that target. Still, despite this, you might need to do KDM hunting. That means even if you're prepared, you might have the opportunity and free time to go for other KDMs, other key decision makers. So you can look in the event, you can look at, you know, if you're looking at circles of people who seems to appear to be the key decision makers, look at their body language, their posture, who is the center of attention, in which direction are the feet pointing. You can try and do KDM hunting. You can try and identify high status, high value prospects in order to speak to. Politicians are usually quite good at this. Lawyers can become good at it as well. And remember, this is coming from my years in Russia. So no offense to any of my Russian friends who are watching this, but don't take yourself too seriously when you go to these kind of events. Smile, whatever you do, smile, make yourself approachable. I would say a smile is worth 2 master's degrees. If you have one lawyer who goes to an event and they have a very stone face, very, very serious, they're going to be less approachable, less likable, and probably get less meetings afterwards as well, even if they have 2 master's degrees. If you have another lawyer who is very open and smiling and happy and listening and, you know, showing themselves to be a pleasant, reasonable person, they're probably going to get more success. So don't take yourself too seriously. Smile, try and relax, try and enjoy it. And remember that these networking events are a strange environment where the normal rules of social action and interaction don't really apply. That in normal life, it's unusual to approach a group of people and introduce yourself and to speak to strangers. You know, in fact, we're told at school, you know, don't do that. At a networking event, you should. Still, I always reassure the younger lawyers, especially, that 99% of people are nice. Even if you're an introvert, even if you're antisocial, at the events, most people will be nice. They will be open to conversation. They understand this is a business event. They will try and engage you in conversation. And if you're unfortunate enough to come to somebody who's having a bad day, what's the worst that can happen? I don't think they're going to swear at you. They're not going to hit you. You know, you can just have a very brief conversation, calm, cool, and collected, and then you speak to someone else. So 99% of people are nice. In the same way that if a stranger at a networking event started talking to you, I think because you're nice, you would speak to them nicely and pleasantly and engage in the small talk and then find out what they're doing, explore the opportunities. It would be the same with other people at these events. You need to, however, pretend to have confidence. So you need to stand with a straight back. You can do your breathing exercises. You can hold something in your hand, which we would call a prop. to give you a little bit of confidence, so that if you have something to hold on to, then with one hand you're able to gesticulate, you can take a sip. You need to, again, not take it too seriously, project calm, cool confidence and engage with people. Keep in mind that this is only going to be a short event. This might be a 30-minute opportunity between presentations. It might be an hour. There's going to be plenty of people who also don't know a lot of other people at that event. If you have had time to prepare, then it'll give you more confidence as well, that you know that there are these interesting people and there are these interesting value propositions that you can offer. In the same way that you might have a physical prop in your hands to give you confidence in person, in your head, you should have 2, 3, 4, at least one value proposition. These would be your legal products that you can offer, your interesting topics to suggest. These would be your psychological props. So physical prop, mental prop. It comes down to that question that we saw in new client hunting. What can you offer me? You need to be able to answer that. Even if no one's asking you, you need to be able to say what you can offer. And again, full service, high quality legal services, it's not going to work. Pay attention to the feet. You can see when people are getting kind of a little bit itchy feet, they want to escape, their feet are pointing away from you. If you've got someone's attention, their feet are pointing to you. You can see the direction that the feet are pointing in a group. If you have people standing in a circle, whoever is making the most interesting conversation, dominating that conversation, the feet are pointing to them. So, you know, take a look at the feet about what's happening there. And pay attention to yourself. If someone is talking to you, not only should you have the eye contact and your feet pointing towards them, even if you're holding a prop, your attention should be on that person, and you should be nodding and smiling and remembering that it's quite important what they are saying, less important what you are saying. You don't need to sell anything. You don't need to present how wonderful your firm is. You're there kind of in a kind of, how would we say, a kind of scouting capacity to identify the opportunities for the follow-up that must inevitably come after the event. Now, if you see a group of people, it's probably a bad idea to walk straight towards them, which some Anglo-American networking books would recommend you do, because you break the group, you interrupt what they're talking about. It can be seen as aggressive. A different approach is to come closer and closer, to enter into their space. And as you become closer and closer, then someone will make eye contact with you. And then someone will even speak to you, because it's going to be very uncomfortable for them not to do that. You don't have to introduce yourself. You can get yourself introduced. If it doesn't work, if you meet that 1%, you can just orbit away. This doesn't need to be weird or strange. Of course, this works easier when there are larger groups of people talking together. But even if you have 3 or 4 or 5, the comment approach is much better than the direct approach. And don't do these kind of crazy approaches. You know, don't wander up to a group and start talking about the buffet. Or I suppose you could talk about, say, a comment or so about the presenters or the speeches or something. But again, by just doing that, you're actually interrupting the group. It's better to kind of get closer, to be nodding, hearing, and not even saying anything, and then someone will speak with you. You can put it into practice, see what works best for you. Now, when you go to events, there's a mistake, which I call the king mistake. I saw one managing partner come to an event, and he was a very big, important person from a certain Balkan country. I'm not even going to mention which one. And he was like a king. He would come into the group and he gave his business cards and he said, hello, nice to see you, shook hands. Then he gave his card to someone else and he gave his card to someone else. That he was behaving like a king. And that's a mistake. He didn't have any conversations. He was just throwing his business cards around everywhere. Obviously, he was very high status. That's not very good. You're not building relations. You're not finding out about needs. You're not giving people your time. That's the king mistake. Do not just introduce yourself and walk on. And you can see people do this in other industries. You've got these crazy recruiters or people trying to sell tax services or accounting. They might do this. Very bad idea. The opposite is the Prince mistake. You go to an event, you find someone to talk to, and you speak to them for the next half hour. I speak to them for the entire event. No, you need to speak to enough people. So if you've set for yourself the objective of speaking to 10 people, then probably you should follow the 10-minute rule, that you're going to need to speak to them for the minimum amount of time to build a relation, to introduce yourself, to understand them, identify an opportunity or two, and give them your card, or at least connect in LinkedIn, and then you move on. You shouldn't spend too little time with each of the different people, and nor should you spend too much. This can be tricky. It can be tricky to escape the conversations, but we'll look at that more in the further sessions. And then after the event, this is the most important time, you follow the 24-48 rule, which means, and most partners are very bad at this, which means that you need to follow up and send off your follow-up emails, probably in either format, to get meetings after the event within 24 to 48 hours. In fact, I first wrote this concept, this must have been 5 years ago, this was before the pandemic, back in 2018. I think I would change this concept now. I would say the 24 rule. Yeah, you probably need to do it within 24 hours. The longer you wait after an event in order to do your follow-up, the lower the chance you have that they will then actually speak with you. And of course, if you don't do any follow-up, you're not going to get any meetings. If you leave your follow-up for a week or two later, your chance of getting meetings are very low. They'll forget who you are, what you were talking about. It's never too late. If you have left it too long, at least do that follow-up. There's a chance you'll get some meetings, but you've got to be quick. You have to be quick. And I'm just thinking, sometimes it's even possible, if you can see an event is happening, you can perhaps even see the names of the people who are going to be attending, the list of the speakers, you can connect to them, you can find their emails. You might be able to kind of do a little bit of preparation with your follow-up even before the event. Or in one case, I heard of one event here in the Czech Republic. It was the Space Week back in November or December 2021. I found on the website that they had a list of many of the different people who were going to be attending. So I didn't even go to the event. I found these people, I found their emails, and I wrote to them saying, hey, some of my Deloitte colleagues are going to be at this event. And I have a few ideas that I'd like to talk to you about. And I managed to get something like 12 meetings after the event without actually even going to the event itself. So I think that's taking the idea perhaps to an extreme. I think your follow-up is more important than the event. That's basically what I'm saying. All right, so I've kind of gone over a little bit in terms of the timing, because now it's 9:10. So we have about 20 minutes left for any different Q&A. Okay, so let me throw open the questions. I'm thinking, of course, to begin with, Elżbieta, I'm thinking about our colleagues in Poland, because we already did sales networking training session before. So specifically, if we could have any questions going a little bit further on some of the topics or some of the thoughts, perhaps you have some ideas or concepts, best practices that you would like to share with us that we found particularly useful in sales networking. Because be careful, if we don't have any questions or comments, I can talk further. I can talk a lot more about this. Okay, so we have a question now from Levent Ozkan. He's one of our colleagues based in Istanbul, in Turkey, and he's asking, because I don't know if you can see the Q&A from the other colleagues or not, so I'll read it to you. He's asking, could you please elaborate more on how to approach someone at an event. Maybe have a pickup line. Okay. No, I wouldn't recommend having pickup lines. You know, there are these different kind of dating books about funny pickup lines, funny expressions to make that first impression. I think when you are approaching a new person, again, I already mentioned this, I think that it's important to have this open and relaxed body language, to be seen to be approachable, and to really actually pay attention to what's happening. And once you've identified a person, you don't need a pickup line. Next session, we will look at how to answer the question, so tell me, what do you do? So we have the concept of the elevator speech, which means you should have a strong, individual, powerful, personal introduction, nice and concise, that you are able to use. Needless to say, most European lawyers don't have this at all. That if you take the common approach and you come to a group, probably I wouldn't recommend that you say anything first of all at all. I would let them say something, and someone will say something. Someone will say, hello, how are you doing? They might ask you a question. What did you think of the presentation? And then you get into the small talk. And I think it's important, especially not just with the Europeans, but I think with many of the countries, to make that effort to engage in the small talk, to talk about this from a business perspective, not very important information. Because when people are at a networking event, they are more interested in you as a person. Probably the brand on your business card doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're a lawyer from DLA Piper, from Deloitte, from Baker McKenzie, from a national law firm, from a small boutique, if they've never heard of this firm. I don't think it really matters. What really matters is going to be your impression as a person. If you show that you're interested in what they're saying, if you show them that you're relaxed and easygoing, if you definitely do not try and sell, you don't start doing some very strong elevator pitch, talking about your capabilities, your unique value propositions, your competitive advantages, boasting and so on, then I think that would make a better impression. When it comes to the intellectual quotient or the emotional quotient, the emotional and social intelligence is going to be much more valuable for you at these events, rather than, showing off, basically. So pickup lines, probably not. Probably not, no. Okay, we have another question from Akua Shrapa, and I apologize, Akua, I don't remember which country you're from, but Akua says, can you please elaborate on what the introductory email should contain? And also, if you're able to get a meeting, what are you going to discuss? I'll tell you what not to do. So Akua, you can drop me an email. I'll send you the information on sales writing. What you don't do is what most lawyers do. You don't send a generic email saying, hey, it was nice to speak to you at this event. We're such and such a law firm. We're very good in our country. If we can help you in future, come back to us. Goodbye. Waste of time, total waste of time, plain vanilla. Rubbish, don't do that. You know, nothing's going to happen. Your objective is to get meetings after the event. You want to have tete-a-tete individual calls, because only when there's a tete-a-tete individual call, then you can ask open questions to identify potential needs. In new client hunting, we saw that all of the different potential clients are like icebergs, and the needs that they have are just the ones on the surface that you can see, but under the water, there are not only implicit needs, which they're not telling you about, so you have to ask questions to find them, but even unknown unknowns. Let's imagine you meet with an IT director, you meet with the founder of some software company. You might have a nice conversation at that event, you do your follow-up email, and the most important thing is the value proposition. What is it that you would like? What's the bait? What's the hook? Why should that person agree to speak to you? If you're simply writing to them saying, hey, we're good lawyers, he might say, hey, that's nice. I don't have legal needs. I have my own in-house lawyer. Life is good. Goodbye. So you need to have a hook. You need to have some kind of bait that's going to hook them to be interested to speak with you. You could take the approach going about an unknown unknown. So you could say, well, you know, it was nice meeting you at this event. I want to draw your attention to the upcoming changes to European AI regulation. This is going to have really significant impact on software companies. Many of them have a misconception of what artificial intelligence is, and they don't realize that what they're doing and the algorithms, this will fall under this legislation. I'd love to hear about your activities, and not only to avoid the risks that this new legislation is going to impose on your company, but the opportunities which we've been able to help other IT firms grasp through this upcoming legislation. So that might hook their interest. Definitely more than saying, we're a full service law firm, we can help you with your needs. So actually, Akua, both of those questions which you just asked, about the introductory email, well, email me and I'll send you the information about sales writing. That was our previous 4 lectures in December. And once you get that meeting, this goes beyond the scope of sales networking. Once you actually get a meeting after an event, you might want to use the consultative selling methodology. That's another of my books. Which basically means you want to be able to ask open questions. How, why, what, where, when. You might get lucky and you have a meeting after the event and they say, hey, we have this big problem, can you help us? And then we can help them. That's fantastic. Most lawyers are able to deal with that situation. And actually, that's what most lawyers are hoping for. On the other hand, you might not get lucky and they don't seem to have any obvious needs. So in this case, you would ask open questions to build a better understanding and a picture of what their activities are. So there are 2 different approaches to the meeting that you can take. You can take a product-based approach that you're prepared and you know that there are these 1, 2, or 3 legal products or solutions topics that you would like to pitch to them. So that's a kind of proactive pitching approach. So you're prepared. There's some things that you can talk about. On the other hand, you also need to be kind of investigative, to ask the open questions, to understand the background of the company, the challenges that they're facing, if there's any pain points, if they have problems or difficulties or challenges, that's good, because as lawyers and as trusted business partners, then we can suggest solutions to that. So you want to find the different pain points. So you can ask the open questions. And if you want to become even more sophisticated with this, you can write to me. You can ask open questions in a consultative selling methodology, but that's like another topic. None of the law firms which I've met around the world actually have a consultative selling methodology. So if you want, you could be one of the first. Dimitar asks, so Dimitar Delchev, he's my good colleague in Sofia, Bulgaria. Is the approach different if you are a speaker at an event, and how to make the best use of this opportunity? Whoa, yes, good point, Dimitar. If you're a speaker, this is a fantastic opportunity, because you don't have to individually speak to 10 different people. You're speaking to everybody. I'll tell you a secret, just between us. In May, I've been invited to be a speaker at an event in London, and I have 1 hour where I'm going to do my stuff. I'm going to talk my magic about business development, and it's for one of the legal networks. Probably I shouldn't mention which one, but it doesn't matter. there's going to be representatives of law firms from about 75 different countries. So what I have already done months in advance, I found these law firms. I know the countries. I found who are the managing partners. It's not difficult to do this with law firms. This is quite easy information to find. Again, I strongly recommend Sales Navigator on LinkedIn. This is the most useful tool in my business development. It's a paid license. I found their emails. And what I'm going to do is, even if none of these guys are at the event, I then have the possibility, even before the event, perhaps in April, I'll send an email saying, hey, I noticed that you guys are going to be at this event. I'm going to be a speaker. Then I have my UVP. Let's do a Teams call. I've got an idea. So my idea is to actually make contact even before the event happens. And what is my target audience, Dimitar? Well, I'm going to be the speaker. I can target all of them. And usually this wouldn't work, because if you're at an industry event, most of the participants are not going to be good prospects. For me, this is a good event because my targets are law firms and I can reach to any of the managing partners. And these managing partners, even if they're not at the event, they can delegate this to a partner. And my metric is going to be quite simple. How many meetings do I get before the event? Try and pitch them something, build a relation, do the event itself, do the post-event meetings. So if you're a speaker, it makes it much, much easier. If you're a presenter, that you have this kind of blanket coverage of the participants, and your chances of getting meetings and mandates are much, much higher. Dimitar, I would also recommend, actually, Dimitar, send me an email, or guys, send me an email. I wrote a book about this, Successful Public Speaking, that in your presentation, again, this comes back to sales writing as well, Dimitar. If you have a speaking slot, don't simply do an informational presentation. Don't present some legal stuff about a legal topic, and that's clever and smart. You need to also do it from a sales writing perspective. So you put in some teasers, you put in some questions which are not answered there, which will hook the curiosity. You put in a few Duracell elements. You say a few things which are controversial to provoke interest. You have one or two or three products that you can pitch, that you can actually have a slide saying, hey, this is a solution. And your CTA, your call to action, is to get these meetings. So if you're a speaker or a presenter, it's wonderful. Much, much better to have a 5-10 minute speaking or presentation slot an event than to simply be a participant. And there's a few other things, Dimitar, so you please email me. Okay, we have a question from Katarzyna in Poland. What would you say are good topics for an introductory small talk? If I identified a KDM before an event and I approaching them at an event, should I start the conversation with small talk or something more connected to my pitch? No, definitely not connected to your pitch. So we're not taking a very American approach here. Small talk is absolutely critical. In terms of the small talk, avoid the 3 Ds: death, disease, dentists. You don't want to talk about anything which is controversial or uncomfortable or disagreeable. So no politics, no religion. And this can be difficult because, I was living in Russia, and sometimes my Russian colleagues or me myself, I would be at some events in Europe, and then people start talking to us in small talk. They ask about some recent scandal, some assassination, something horrible. Don't go there. It doesn't matter what are your political thoughts. You are not only representing your law firm, and of course you would not ever say anything bad about your law firm at a networking event. You need to also present your jurisdiction in the best possible light. So if they even start asking you about some war, scandal, political thing, you get them off the topic. You don't want to go there. You don't want to go there. You don't want to start presenting your country as being a horrible, corrupt, dangerous place to do business as well, which quite often some of my Russian friends would do. They would have very honest conversations. Don't do that. You're there for sales. You're there for sales. So in your small talk, remember, don't take a British approach. Small talk isn't there just to waste time. So the British would generally talk about the weather. That's kind of cliche and dull. You don't talk about the weather. Your small talk is also an opportunity to find out more about your prospect. Is it the first time to this event? You know, where did they come from? How did they get here? What did they think of the event? Are they here by themselves? Keep in mind that even if you're speaking to somebody, on the first 3 seconds, you understand they are too junior. They're not a key decision maker. You follow the 10-minute rule. You have to ask open questions and build a relationship with them. Doesn't mean you're going to follow up with them after the event, but you could ask them, who are they here with? Maybe they're here with their boss. They might be able to introduce you to their boss. Maybe they know some other people at this event. So in the small talk, don't kill time and talk about rubbish. You know, don't talk about the weather and some kind of inane, dull, boring topics. You can be kind of smart with your small talk as well. Think of prepare, make a few bullet points. What would be small talk topics that you think would actually have some value? And again, remember, nobody is useless. You know, that sounds such like a horrible thing to say. Everybody is interesting. Everybody has their story and their background. Even if you're speaking to somebody who is really quite junior and they're not there with anyone else and they don't know anyone, have some curiosity. Ask them about their industry. You know, what do you know about their industry, their area of activity? Ask them what are the challenges, the opportunities. Have curiosity. If you could see somebody's life or even the work life as a movie, it would be very interesting. There's a lot of value, a lot of opportunity. Moreover, even if you're not going to follow up with different people that you've met, so let's imagine you did your 10 meetings, 3 of them you do your follow-up with because they're worth getting follow-up meetings with afterwards. With those other 7, you still should connect with them in LinkedIn, and you might even think of doing a thing called an active referral. So let's imagine that you met a junior HR manager from a certain company. You had a nice conversation. You're not going to suggest having a follow-up meeting with them because they don't have power, money, authority to buy legal services. But if you add them in LinkedIn, and then you look at their company and you see who are they connected to, who is more senior, you might see that they're connected to the HR director or the chief people officer or the chief legal officer. And you could then send an active referral email which says, hey, it was nice speaking with you. I'd love to get an introduction to such and such a colleague in your company because, and you have a value proposition, and you suggest, how about the 3 of us have a coffee next week at your office? Almost none of the European lawyers actually do this. You know, the European lawyers, again, I'm just talking about European lawyers because these are the ones that I spend 80% of my time working with. Usually the European lawyers rely on passive referrals. They do some good work and somebody introduces one of their friends or colleagues. Change it the other way around. Do an active referral campaign. And guys, what's actually the worst that could happen? With those 7 contacts that you will not be asking for an individual meeting with them, you could just email nothing and nothing is going to happen. You could try and leverage that good social equity to get a meeting with their colleague. I'm just aware of the time, so I'm getting carried away. But you could develop this idea further. You could do a cross-sell. You could say, hey, you know, it was nice speaking with you. I'd love to introduce you guys to my employment law colleague because there's this employment law value proposition, which is very interesting. How about the 3 of us have a meeting? Or actually, in this case, the 3 of us having a meeting wouldn't be a good idea because our contact is too junior. So let's do a cross referral. That would be the 4 of us. So you would say, hey, and bring along the chief people officer. So in this case, it would be you and your junior connection in that company at the meeting. And it would be your colleague, the employment lawyer, and the chief people officer. And again, this means that you would actually have to have a good value proposition from your employment colleague. So the question gets a little bit more difficult. It is no longer, why should I work with you? And you present your clever value proposition. It becomes, why should I work with them? And it means, do you know? Can you communicate? What are the value propositions in your law firm from employment, from competition, from IP, from dispute resolution, from M&A? Needless to say, I haven't met any law firms which are at that level where they have defined product value propositions from the different practice groups, and all of the different lawyers at least know one of them from the other practice groups. But you have to be prepared for that. You need to be aware that life can be funny. You could have 10 meetings at an event and you meet one big CEO who's a very nice target for your law firm to meet with. You can break the 10-minute rule. In that case, you can spend 20 minutes, why not, speaking to them. And then they start talking to you about IP issues. Now, I don't care if you're not an intellectual property lawyer. You need to have an understanding of IP. You need to understand what is the value proposition or value propositions that your law firm could suggest in IP. Again, if you give some kind of plain generic information that your firm can do copyright, trademark, patents, and IP disputes, not gonna work. And you will not have the opportunity to say to them, oh, this is really good. Let me introduce you to my IP colleague. I'll send an email afterwards. You might not get that chance. So you need to be prepared about the value propositions in IP. Now ask yourself, what can you guys offer in IP? Can you answer it? So if you can't, you probably lose that opportunity. So you need to understand the value propositions of yourself and then of your colleagues to be able to have that kind of conversation. Someone who meets you doesn't care if you say that you're not an IP lawyer. To them, you are a lawyer. You're coming from a full service law firm. If you're coming from a full service law firm, you have to be able to answer them about full service. It's kind of unfair, but that's where we need to get to. Okay, so I'm just aware of the time, and I see Piotr had to leave to go to another meeting. So I think on that point, let's wrap up for today. I can share my screen very quickly again, because I wanted to show you. So there's some ideas. Send me an email if you want any of the materials I talked about, we can discuss. And then in January and February, you can see the different cities and the tours that I'm going to be doing. So next week, I'm in the Balkans, in Hungary, Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia. So if you're around in these places and you would like a coffee or a meeting or something, email me. Then a couple of weeks after, I'm in Greece, Turkey, and Cyprus. In February, we have my Baltic tour. And then there's a few others also in February: Malta, Moldova, Austria, Romania, and Germany. So if you're in any of these places, drop me a line. And I think on that point, let's finish for today. And I look forward to, send me an email. Yeah, send me an email. I like the follow-up after these events. And I will continue on next Thursday when we look at topic 2, session 2 regarding sales networking, but more specifically how to get into the group, what to say, how to drive that conversation, and also how to then get out of the group. So we'll go into some more detail. All right, so thanks very much, and I'll speak to you next week. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Bye-bye.